Today, let's find out what really happened to Lex Luger. He had the looks, the fame, and the body that defined wrestling's golden era. But behind all the glory was a dark story of downfall, addiction, and redemption. So let's get into the video and uncover what exactly happened to Lex Luger. Lex Luger's story started long before he ever stepped into a wrestling ring. He wasn't just another guy chasing fame. He was an athlete with world-class potential. In high school, he stood out as a football star, good enough to earn a spot on the powerhouse University of Miami Hurricanes team. But even back then, there were warning signs. Luger loved the party life a little too much, and that lifestyle eventually got him expelled from the university. Still, his athletic talent kept him moving forward. He went on to play football in several leagues, from the CFL to the short-lived USFL, and even made it into the NFL for a while. But no matter how promising things looked, his tendency to chase short-term thrills always seemed to get in the way, a pattern that would follow him throughout his life and later play a devastating role during his wrestling fame. After football, Luger wanted a new challenge, something that matched his size, strength, and intensity. In 1985, he walked into the Championship Wrestling from Florida office and met legendary trainer Hiro Matsuda, the same man who had trained Hulk Hogan. Matsuda was known for his brutal workouts, 500 Hindu squats, 500 jump squats, and hours of sweat before a trainee could even step into the ring. Most people didn't last, but Luger did, and fast. He prided himself on being one of Matsuda's quickest graduates, something he credited to his athletic background and his obsession with pushing his limits. This was the period when Luger built not only his body but also his image, the belief that he was indestructible, both physically and mentally. It was powerful motivation, but also a dangerous illusion. Luger's transition into wrestling couldn't have gone better. By 1986, fans were already calling him a future star, and that same year he was named Rookie of the Year by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, even beating out names like Sting. In Jim Crockett Promotions, which would later become WCW, Luger rose through the ranks with incredible speed. His run with the legendary Four Horsemen from 1987 to 1989 made him one of wrestling's most talked-about figures. His heated rivalries with Ric Flair became instant classics, earning Feud of the Year honors twice from PWI. Over the years, Luger stacked up titles: 5 U.S. championships, 2 world championships, and 3 tag team titles, making him one of the few to achieve the prestigious WCW Triple Crown. His success was undeniable, and soon he was ready for the biggest leap of his career, the move to the World Wrestling Federation. When Luger joined the WWF in the early 90s, it was a massive deal. The company saw him as the next big star, the man who could carry the torch. But things didn't go exactly as planned. His first role wasn't even as a wrestler. In 1992, he appeared as an announcer for Vince McMahon's failed World Bodybuilding Federation. It wasn't long, though, before he was back in the ring. He debuted at the 1993 Royal Rumble as the Narcissist, a self-obsessed villain who flexed in front of mirrors and showed off his sculpted body. He even used a metal plate in his forearm, left from a motorcycle accident, to knock opponents out cold. Then, in one of the most dramatic image shifts in wrestling history, Luger rebranded himself just months later. On July 4th, 1993, aboard the USS Intrepid, he slammed the 500-pound WWF champion Yokozuna to the mat, instantly becoming the All-American hero. The crowd went absolutely wild. In that moment, it felt like Lex Luger had finally arrived. The golden boy America could rally behind. Luger's transformation into the All-American hero kicked off one of the most ambitious promotions in wrestling history, the Lex Express. It was a huge bus tour that traveled all over the country, with Luger waving the flag and meeting fans in towns big and small. The idea was simple: turn him into America's next hero before his big summer match against Yokozuna. At first, it seemed to work. He was everywhere, in magazines, on talk shows, and fans even voted him the most popular wrestler of the year in 1993. But as the weeks went on, something just didn't click. The cheers felt forced, the excitement felt scripted, and audiences weren't fully buying into Vince McMahon's hard sell. Part of the problem was that Luger himself wasn't living up to the image. Reports later revealed he didn't actually enjoy the Lex Express tour. Instead of sleeping on the bus like everyone expected, he often chose to fly ahead and stay in nice hotels. A move that made him seem disconnected from the man of the people image the WWF was trying to build. It was a small detail, but it showed that the character didn't really match the man. Fans could sense that. And at the same time, another wrestler, Bret the Hitman Hart, was quietly winning people over with pure skill, heart, and authenticity. So when SummerSlam 1993 arrived, and Luger beat Yokozuna only by countout, meaning he didn't win the championship, the whole storyline fell flat. It felt like all that buildup had led to nothing. Even though he got another shot at WrestleMania X in 1994, the magic was gone. Fans had already chosen their real hero, and it wasn't Lex Luger. After leaving WWF, Luger returned to WCW in 1995, and it didn't take long for him to reclaim his spot at the top. He was a key part of the Monday Night Wars, the fierce ratings battle between WCW and WWF, and one of the company's most recognizable stars. On August 4th, 1997, during an unforgettable episode of Monday Nitro, Luger defeated Hollywood Hogan to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The crowd went wild. It was one of the biggest reactions in the show's history. For a brief moment, it felt like redemption. But only days later, at the Road Wild pay-per-view, Hogan won the title right back. Just like that, the celebration was over. Luger's short reign was a reminder of how WCW now saw him. Not as a long-term champion, but as a quick fix, someone they could use for a big one-night moment to spike TV ratings. By the early 2000s, Luger's fast-paced wrestling lifestyle finally caught up with him. He's been brutally honest in interviews about that time, admitting his life was a train wreck. He was living hard, drinking heavily, and using drugs constantly. The fame, the money, and the endless touring had turned into something dark. He once said he believed he was Superman, that nothing could hurt him. That belief fueled his cyborg nickname and made him think he could push his body beyond all limits. Friends would joke about how he could stay up all night doing drugs, then show up at the gym the next morning like nothing happened. But what they didn't realize was that the same intensity that drove his success was also destroying him from the inside out. Everything came crashing down in May 2003. Luger's girlfriend, Elizabeth Hewlett, better known to fans as Miss Elizabeth, died from an accidental overdose after mixing painkillers with vodka. The tragedy shocked the wrestling world. When police searched their home, they found a large stash of drugs, steroids, OxyContin, growth hormones, the full picture of how deep the addiction ran. To make matters worse, Luger had been arrested for domestic violence just days before her death, though the charges were later dropped. Still, the damage was done. Elizabeth's death wasn't just a headline, it was the darkest moment of his life, the one that forced him to finally confront what years of addiction and denial had done to him. When police found the drugs in Luger's home after Elizabeth's death, the consequences were serious. He was charged with multiple felony counts of drug possession. Some reports said 13, others said as many as 17, all tied to the huge stash of narcotics in the house. Luger ended up pleading guilty, which led to a $1,000 fine and 5 years of probation. But even then, he couldn't seem to stay out of trouble. While still on probation, he tried to leave the country and was caught, which meant jail time. The former world champion who once stood at the top of the wrestling world was now behind bars, serving 9 weeks in jail. For the first time, he was forced to sit still and face himself. No spotlight, no ring, no distractions, just silence and the reality of how far he'd fallen. Over time, Luger began to take full responsibility for everything that had happened. He didn't make excuses or blame others. In interviews, he openly said that Elizabeth had been collateral damage in his life of self-destruction. One of his most honest admissions came when he confessed that, right after her death, his first thought wasn't about losing her. It was about how it would affect him in his career. It was a brutally honest moment of self-awareness, but it also marked the beginning of change. It showed he was finally looking inward, acknowledging his flaws, and trying to understand the person he'd become. That deep reflection eventually led to something even bigger, a complete spiritual transformation. In April 2006, Luger became a born-again Christian. What made this moment even more powerful was where it happened, in the same extended stay hotel room where he'd once overdosed and battled terrifying nightmares during the worst phase of his addiction. One day, after talking with a hotel chaplain about faith, something shifted inside him. On that very same couch where he once dreamed he was drowning, he said he found peace. He described it as the first time he truly surrendered, realizing that all the control, pride, and self-reliance that defined the total package had gotten him nowhere. Surrendering, he said, is the strongest thing a man or a woman can ever do, to acknowledge our Creator who's in control of all things. That faith became his foundation, his way of rebuilding from the inside out. And he would need that strength soon, because just a year later, his body gave out in a way no one expected. In October 2007, while on a flight, Luger suddenly suffered a spinal cord injury, a spinal stroke to be exact. The blood flow to his spine was cut off, causing massive swelling from his neck down to his chest. Overnight, the man once known for his perfect physique was paralyzed from the neck down. Doctors told him he was now a quadriplegic, unable to move his arms or legs. Luger later called it a freak accident, but many believe decades of football hits and wrestling bumps had taken their toll. Instead of bitterness, though, Luger saw meaning in it. He said losing his physical strength was God's way of humbling him, a lesson he needed to learn. "I was trying to be 27 at age 47, he said quietly, but God had to get rid of my vanity. After the spinal stroke, Lex Luger's life completely changed. He went from being one of wrestling's most powerful men to barely being able to move. In the beginning, he could only lift his arms, while the rest of his body stayed paralyzed. It was a painful, slow process, one that tested him in ways he never imagined. But help came from an old friend, Diamond Dallas Page. DDP introduced him to his famous DDP yoga program, the same one that helped Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall turn their lives around. It wasn't easy, but little by little, Lex began making progress. With determination and faith, he went from being fully dependent on a wheelchair to standing on his own with a walker. Then, after years of struggle, he finally reached a moment he'd dreamed of, standing unassisted for the first time. Luger often says that it was his faith in God that carried him through, believing that, no matter what we face, if we put our total faith in God, He'll bring us through. These days, Lex Luger lives a very different kind of life. Instead of chasing fame or perfection, he's focused on helping others. He travels to schools, churches, and events, sharing his story and spreading a message of hope, forgiveness, and faith. People who once doubted his transformation now see how genuine it is. He talks about rejecting the need for worldly success and instead letting a higher purpose guide your life. It's a complete turn from the man he used to be, once known as the total package, obsessed with power and appearance. Now he stands for humility and faith. His life has come full circle, from the heights of fame to the depths of tragedy, and finally to redemption. And with his expected WWE Hall of Fame induction in 2025, Lex Luger's story isn't just about wrestling glory anymore. It's about how losing everything helped him find something far greater: peace, purpose, and a faith that never broke. And that's it for today's video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.